Welcome to lesson 6 of Journey of the Soul, the 6th and final lesson of this journey. The title of this evening's lesson is Life is Short-ish, How Death Informs Life. And really now is the time to kind of give a little bit of a summary. We have learned a lot of things over the past 5 weeks. We've accomplished a lot. But here's my question. That's what we'll start over. Okay, we're on page 210. We have learned that death is not necessarily the end, despite the fact that death is natural. Death is only the beginning. It leads on to a new phase of life. And therefore we shouldn't be afraid of death. We've even learned that death sometimes has, life sometimes has multiple versions. Last week we spoke a lot about reincarnation. We spoke about how the soul, which existed before life and continues after life, that's the real me. The body is only a temporary container. All these exciting things. We spoke about heaven and hell, and how hell should not be looked at as some sort of punishment for what we do, but rather a consequence of our actions, and how we go through that in a way where the soul gets cleansed or goes through the soul catharsis. So powerful stuff. But I promised you at the beginning of this course that whereas we're going to be learning a lot about death, or what we'll call the afterlife, we have a very, very clear goal in mind. Through all 6 lessons, we've had a very clear goal in mind, and that is to try and affect our lives in the here and now. In other words, there's no point in just spending so much time speaking about death all the time, right? The whole purpose is to get to life, so therefore, how does that affect the way I live today? And that's why I'd like to start with this exercise on page 210. You have almost completed the journey into Judaism's approach to death, afterlife, reincarnation, etc. Take a moment to identify 3 ways that the perspectives we gain can influence a person's life and its daily realities. We're not going to ask you to share this one. This is for you. One of the focuses, one of the things we stressed throughout the past 5 weeks is the idea that death should not be feared. And that we should recognize that death is the gateway to a new reality, etc. So moving on to exercise 6.2, here's the next question, okay? So just to flip the whole thing on its head, there are benefits to thinking about our own mortality. In fact, there is an app that's called WeCroak. WeCroak. That's the name of the app. You've heard of this, Joanne? I see you shaking your head.
WeCroak.
She's muted. Hold on. It's called WeCroak. It's got millions and millions of downloads. And the goal of the app, it looks a little bit like this. It reminds you every once in a while not to forget that you're going to die, and then it's some sort of inspirational quote about how contemplating mortality can actually affect our lives. And I have to say, by the way, that this app is not the only one. I was looking for a face. So I had a Fitbit for a long time, a Fitbit watch, and recently it kind of got in some trouble, so we had to buy a new one. So we bought a new one, and I was just playing with it literally Saturday night. I was setting it up. I just to choose like a face, like a clock face, because they have different faces. If anybody has one of these smartwatches, you know what I'm talking about. And there's one of them, believe it or not, based on research and science, that can have a countdown on the bottom, how many hours or how many days, I forget exactly, you have left to live, estimated obviously. And it sits there on the bottom, and it's always there. So here's my question for you, okay? Can you identify, I know we can think of reasons and ways that actually contemplating mortality is probably not such a great thing. We certainly shouldn't let it possess us. We shouldn't let the day that we're going to die define our lives and overtake us. That's a very unhealthy thing. We can talk about that sometime. But for right now, I want to talk about some of the benefits of contemplating mortality, at least every once in a while. And for this, I'd love some responses. Can we get some, anybody have any ideas? Sheila, what do you think? What are some benefits to occasionally contemplating our mortality? Not too often, but every once in a while.
Valuing the time that we have left in this realm.
Valuing the time we have left in this world, 100%.
Most of it. You know.
What else we got? Carol? There's got to be a couple of things. Come on. If anybody else has something, please speak up. Please chime up.
Mine is the same, that maybe we won't waste too much time.
We won't waste too much time. That's definitely a positive thing. Anybody got anything else?
Yeah, to recognize how valueless it is to spend time in front of the television.
Very good. Or anything like that. The television can also be a force for good. We have to recognize that. Television can be good things. I'm not saying that many of the TV stations are doing that. Most of them are not utilizing it for good. But every once in a while, you can come across something on television that is good. But 100%, wasting time. Same idea. That's what we get here. So if you think back to lesson 1, we spoke a little bit about terror management theory. Anybody remember that? Thanatophobia, the fear of death human beings have naturally, and how terror management theory deals with this, wrestling with this concept. So it turns out that with some really very recent, very emerging science, or in the mental health field, there is a little bit about this idea. With the idea that every once in a while we should contemplate our day of death. And Catherine, if I can ask you to start us off, please, by reading for us text 1, which is a paper on this topic. No, you muted yourself. You were unmuted. You muted yourself. I'm sorry.
Unmute?
There you go. Now we hear you.
Oh, okay. So text 1. There is no exercise or reflection as potent, perhaps, as contacting one's ending. In confronting our own passing, we are better able and more willing to help others see the power of awareness of that which is inevitable, death, helping us to wake up to the tender colors of life and a personal creation. In contemplating our own end, we recognize that there is still time for life in whatever time is left. Values are there to be lived until that last inevitable moment. To acknowledge this is freeing.
Thank you, Catherine. So it turns out there's a lot more than what we were just talking about to this. We've spoken about valuing our time, the amount of time that we have. But there's quite a bit. First of all, it can help us prioritize and retain focus. So whereas we all have dreams and goals and things that we want to accomplish with our life, every once in a while, not necessarily from a time perspective, just kind of from a focus perspective, we can lose track of that. And when we think about our day of death, and maybe that's because we don't have that much time left, but maybe even if we have plenty of time left. Baruch Hashem, many of us, we should all live to 120. But recognizing that one day will be an end means, okay, I got to make this count. Avoiding foolish mistakes, right? We might think things through more. We may appreciate the moments that we do have. Take those moments, actually make them count, live them more fully. And most importantly, I think, is make our lives more meaningful. They shouldn't just be functional. It shouldn't just be a way of getting to where we want to get to, or getting through it and living, but it should actually be something that we can thrive through. In 2015, there was actually a study done that found that thinking about death can produce positive results in a person's thinking and in a person's behavior. They came up with 3 primary, good benefits. Number 1 is it often leads to increased attention to a person's health. Right? You think about the day you're going to die. Gitti was asking me when I found that face for the clock that had this countdown at the bottom. She wanted to know because it's primarily an exercise watch, and I use it when I run. So she wanted to know. So if you go out on a run, does it go up, by a couple of days? Like, oh, your estimate is higher. You're probably going to live a couple more days. And then if you don't exercise for a month, does it go down? obviously, to have such a countdown would be folly because I don't know that it would actually be, you know, I don't know that it would be accurate, but and it would distract us a lot. But the general idea of thinking about it can definitely have a positive impact on our health, what we eat and how we exercise, etc. So that was one result that the study found. The second one is that we become less prone to taking risks when we every once in a while contemplate the fact that our life is temporal. And number three, we have more of an eagerness to obey rules.
Really?
It can have obviously its virtues and its vices. Leaving all the studies aside for a second, as this lesson continues, our goal is going to be to explore the Jewish view on this topic to try and figure out what exactly does Judaism have to say about contemplating our date of death. Is it something that should be a preoccupation, something we should think about once in a while? And let's dive right into it. So on page 212, we get started. Barbie, if I can ask you to read for us verse 2a.
All right.
So this is a verse from Psalms, from Tehillim. It's actually
From Tehillim.
4.
Okay. Be agitated and do not sin. Verbalize within your hearts, upon your beds, and be forever silent.
Okay, this is a very cryptic verse. They've tried to translate it, I believe, as literally as they can. Rigzu v'al techato. Be agitated, this will lead you not to sin. Number 2, imru v'lvavchem, verbalize in your hearts. Number 3, amishkavchem, upon your beds, literally means upon you, where you lie down. And number 4, b'dom musela, be forever silent. So obviously this is very cryptic. What's going on here? What are these four pieces of advice? So Barbie, if you can read for us, please. The Talmud like decodes, unpacks these 4 statements in this one verse in chapter 4 of Psalms. Go ahead.
All right. We should always agitate our good inclination against our evil inclination, as it is stated. Be agitated and do not sin.
So piece of advice number 1, and the Alter Rebbe talks about this in Tanya all the time, we should always be trying to agitate ourselves, now not agitate ourselves in a bad way, we should work ourselves up, our positive inclination over our evil inclination. In other words, get upset. We should recognize that some things are low for us to do. And we should look at our own animal soul and say, why would you want us to do that? We should look at our own evil inclinations. Why would you want me to do that? And agitate ourselves against that negative action or whatever it is. Okay. Now, what if this doesn't work? Number 2.
If this vanquishes the evil inclination, all is good. But if not, we should occupy ourselves with Torah study, as it is stated, verbalize Torah teachings until they enter within your hearts.
Okay, so if you're not following now, let me just point out to you, every time he says as it states, he's quoting the verse that we just brought from Tehillim, right? So step number 1 was be agitated. That will lead to not sinning. If that doesn't work, he says, start to verbalize, learn Torah, throw yourself into God's wisdom, and then that will work, okay? If this vanquishes it.
If this vanquishes it, all is good. But if not, we should recite the Shema, as it is stated, upon your beds.
Maybe now, Barbara, you start to see why I asked you to read this particular quote. I remember that you liked very much the opening paragraph that we quoted it maybe last week or 2 weeks ago, where we forgive everyone before we go to sleep. The bedtime Shema, the mitzvah of reading the Shema before we go to sleep each night in the Siddur, is not just supposed to be a prayer to God. It's also supposed to be a moment to reflect on our person, on who we are and how we're doing as a person, particularly in our interpersonal relationships. Okay, so that's the third time. That's the third way that we can learn to do the right thing. And if this vanquishes it,
and if this vanquishes it, all is good. But if not, we should remind ourselves of the day of death, as it is stated, and be forever silent.
That moment of death, the being forever silent, something we think about, perhaps not. And by the way, we're built in with these defense mechanisms. We spoke about it at the beginning. Because of thanatophobia, because we're afraid to think about death, We often just push it out of our minds. We just don't think about it. I mean, anybody, I don't believe we have any estate lawyers on here, right? Do we?
No.
Laura, does Phil do estate planning? He does? Oh, okay. So we do have somebody who's at least close to the field. Laura's husband does estate planning. Anybody who does estate planning can tell you that unfortunately, not enough people are hiring them. A lot of people get caught unawares, obviously if they pass away young. But even those that don't pass away young, very often, I'll tell you as a rabbi that I often get, siblings that will come over to me and say, can you mediate between us? Our parents didn't leave a proper will, or they did, but then this one's playing around, that one's playing around, whatever it is, right? Because the people we're kind of weary to deal with the day that we pass away. But it turns out that while obviously it shouldn't become a preoccupation, there are a lot of benefits to it, okay?
Mhm.
And there is no better story to illustrate this than the story of Alfred Nobel. Does anybody know this story? It's quite a famous story, Alfred Nobel's story. If you know it, you're going to really enjoy this video. If you don't know it, you're going to enjoy it even more. So please turn your attention to the video screens.
Dynamite, from the ancient Greek term for power, is a potent material indeed. But a person can hardly encounter a more powerful motivator to plan for his day of death than the opportunity to read his own obituary in the media. Alfred Nobel was a 19th century Swedish chemist and engineer with 350 different patents. He owned 90 factories that manufactured armaments and was the inventor of dynamite. His brothers Ludwig and Robert Nobel were tycoons with oil fields along the Caspian Sea. Alfred invested in his brother's enterprise and he grew ever wealthier. Then, in 1888, Ludwig Nobel died suddenly while on a visit to Cannes, France. The passing of one of the Nobel magnates was exceptionally newsworthy. In their haste to hammer out the headlines, the French newspapers misidentified the deceased, mistakenly reporting that Alfred Nobel had died. Alfred was shocked to read of his own passing. He was deeply disturbed at the far from flattering obituaries. Bold black headlines screamed, "The Merchant of Death is dead." The fine print was no better. Dr. Alfred Nobel, who became rich by finding ways to kill more people faster than ever before, died yesterday. Alfred was sobered by an experience afforded few. Is this how I will be remembered when my time comes, he wondered? Will I be forever tainted as the merchant of death? Historians speculate that Alfred, determined to improve his genuine obituary by improving his lasting effect on humanity, took steps while still hale and hearty to ensure that mankind would remember him as an everlasting contributor to the advance of civilization and quality of life. On November 27, 1895, Alfred Nobel signed his last will and testament, designating 94% of his vast fortune to the creation of the Nobel Prizes. To this day, his name is synonymous with the advance of science, medicine, literature, and world peace. All it took to transform a merchant of death into an angel of progress and peace was a moment of serious reflection on mortality and its consequences.
Most people hear about the Nobel Prizes way before they even know necessarily about dynamite. Never mind who invented dynamite and how much of his life was dedicated to selling arms which take other people's lives, etc. So all it took for Alfred Nobel to turn his life around was to recognize, it was like it hit him like a ton of bricks, like to recognize one day my life is going to be over. And what do I want to be known by? Do I want to be known for the fact that as a result of my inventions, thousands of people passed away? Or do I want to be known as Alfred Nobel, the Nobel Prizes, the Nobel Peace Prize, the Nobel Prize for Literature, for Education, and all of the amazing things that he's managed to accomplish by putting all those prizes and all that emphasis on that. You know, to have, you're hearing noise from some, hold on. He's saying we're hearing some background noise. It might actually be from me, but maybe not. Is that better, Larry?
It sounds like music.
Yeah, that's my son. So I'll have to apologize for that. I was hoping that
Okay.
Zoom would filter it out a little more. Gitti is in New York. My wife is in New York at the wedding of the son of Rabbi and Mrs. Yisrael Pinson. And as a result, I'm single dadding. And the only way to really give this class with him, because it's not his bedtime yet, is to have him on the tablet. He's watching Uncle Moshe, for anyone who knows. If you've heard of Uncle Moshe, it's like kind of Jewish Barney, that kind of idea.
Okay.
So I apologize for the music. Is it distracting? Should I have him lower it a little bit?
It's fine. I'll deal with it as long as nobody else is complaining. I'm fine.
I'm gonna lower it a little bit.
It's not bothering me at all.
It's fine.
I'm
Okay.
just gonna lower it a drop.
Let them have fun.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to take away his fun.
No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Okay. The notion for lowering the volume was vetoed by the board.
Okay. There you go.
Maybe we'll have him come say goodnight soon. So we were talking about the idea of contemplating the day of a person's death, and I think when we talk about that, it's important to contrast that with the popular notion that there is today in the world. I think many of you here have been to the Hanoka household. If you've been to the Hanoka household, you know that their address is on Mar Vista, but that they live at the corner of Mar Vista and anyone? Anybody want to unmute?
That street, what's that street
What's that
called?
small street called?
I know, what's that street? It's something weird. It's
Loya?
Almost.
YOLO.
YOLO. Barbie, if you know YOLO, what does YOLO stand for? You know?
oh yeah, YOLO. Yeah.
YOLO.
Before I tell you what
Uh,
YOLO stands for, I will tell you that if you walk past the Hanoka household as often as I do, because I live 2 blocks away and I'm related, and that's Bobby's house, then you will often see cars literally risking their cars, their lives, etc. They
Take
like
pictures.
pull over on the side, like they notice the last second that the name of the street is YOLO, and they like give a quick, and they pull over to the side and they have to take a selfie with them. Anybody know what YOLO stands for?
Well, it's went on the screen.
You only live once.
That's right. You only live once. Thank you. Thank you to all those that shouted that out. And this is a movement, actually, of people. You only live once, they say. Because you only live once, so I think YOLO Street is older than the movement of YOLO, but either way, you only live once, they say. Therefore you should
live well.
Therefore, you should, I don't know, whatever it is, right? And it leads to things like bucket lists. Can I get a raise of hands? Anybody have a bucket list? Anybody? Some people have like a quasi bucket list. And usually bucket lists are full of things like, go skydiving or, I don't know, meet an astronaut or things like that. You know what I mean? Like these exciting, big moments, like you only live once. So what are you getting so careful about it? You got to take risks, you got to enjoy yourself, etc. And that cannot be further from the Jewish approach. The acronym, I guess, would be accurate. You only live once. That's true. And we should think about that every once in a while, but it shouldn't lead to us doing more enjoyable things. It should lead to us doing more meaningful things, to having more of an impact, to making our life count. And this brings us to the meditation for this week. So if I can ask you to please turn your attention to the video screens, to Rabbi Shea Stout.
For our meditation reflection for this final lesson of the Journey of the Soul course, we're going to take a meditation straight from our sages, from Pirkei Avot, the Ethics of the Fathers, which tells us to meditate upon 3 things. Imagine, if you will, that there's an eye that sees, an ear that hears, and all of your deeds are written in a book. Now, that's something that for centuries would have taken imagination. But in our day and age, it doesn't take any imagination at all, because we know that everything is seen, heard, and recorded. What we're going to do now is imagining ourselves at the end of our lives in the editing room, so to speak, with all the footage, all of the film, all of the recordings, every moment of our lives. It's there for review, to rewatch, to relive. Imagine yourself now looking back through your life, watching the real-time movie of every single second. See yourself in every place where you've been, every person you've ever met, even if you passed them in an elevator for 5 seconds. And now, let's start to edit and form our highlight film. And of course, what does a highlight film mean? Now that the soul has left the body, the highlights are not which restaurants I ate at or where I went on vacation. The soul now has moved on from a body. The highlights are, what good did I do in this world? Who did I love? Who did I help? Start to imagine your life. Start to reflect on the real highlight film. Those small fleeting moments that were over in seconds, but last forever. Who did you affect? Who did you help? How did you make the world a better place? And now realize that we're not editing just yet. We're still filming. We're still making the movie. Imagine yourself now, you're still filming the movie. Visualize it. You're in the director's chair. What scene will you direct? We'll take a moment to visualize and reflect.
So one of the important takeaways that we can have from recognizing that life is not just about the number of years that we spend in this world, but rather that it goes beyond that, and the neshama and all the things we mentioned up until today, one of the ways that it can impact our life is the more we think about those things on a daily basis, that one day the neshama will no longer be able to do mitzvahs. We recognize that you do only live once, and that therefore not every moment should be filled with bucket list items. Every moment should be filled as much as possible with meaning and with impactful things, with things of cosmic importance. So that's one takeaway. Now, Sheila mentioned earlier about time, the importance of recognizing that every minute counts. On page 240, we have a very interesting exercise here. Let me pick on somebody. Laura Reutemann. Help us do this exercise. In your view, okay? In other words, with regards to your life, Laura, you with us? Unmute.
Yeah.
Which do you consider of greater value, your time or your money? And explain your choice.
Well, my case, definitely my time.
Okay.
Some people, have a lot of money and they put it to really generous, good use. And I say that because I've been the benefit. My daughter has been the benefit of the generosity of people who use their money for tzedakah,
But in your instance, you feel that you value your time more than you value your money. and if I understand your explanation, it's mainly because you're saying you don't have as much money as people like these mega, millionaires to be able to do that. Let me try to frame this for you differently, okay? I'm going to ask you a follow-up question to see, and please don't be embarrassed. I think that this applies to all of us. Certainly when I did this exercise myself, which I try to do all the exercises before the class, I found myself caught by surprise by the second half of this exercise. The question is, are you living your life in a manner that is consistent with the answer you just provided? Okay, so here's how we're going to do this. You're telling me that you value your time more. Which one do you consider more horrific? If you kill a day, let's call it, you just stay home and lounge around in bed, I'm watching TV and watch a movie and take it easy. Do you consider that more horrific? Or if you, I don't know, double park and get yourself $1,000 ticket or something somewhere, which one affects you more? Which one, like, oh God, I can't believe that happened to me.
Well, it's funny. I don't need to get too deep on this, but I find it hard to think of wasting a day. I feel like sometimes the downtime is like a meditation
But
and a
there's no question. Sometimes,
so it's hard to even imagine wasting a day.
sometimes a day where you do nothing is important in order to do other things on other days. It's like a mental health day. It's like a day in order to keep 100%. But if we could consider a day wasted, here's another way of putting this. If I were to pay you $1,000 in order to not do anything today, would you take it? Or would you say, no way, I wouldn't give up a day in order to not do this? I won't keep you on the spot anymore, Laura.
Well, you know what? I think I know what you're getting at.
Of course.
Trying to get at the notion of wasting time. Here's one way I could think of it. What if I spent a day doing something that, it's semantics, but like if I spent a day doing something really disgusting, like that would be, if I wasn't wasting it, but if I was using it, but using it in a bad way,
So
that would be horrible. Like to
100%, that would be horrible. And I don't want to go that far. What I'm doing is I'm trying to leave the text 3, and Joanne, maybe you can read this for us. They've done their best to have it rhyme in English as well, but it really does not do justice. I'll start with the Hebrew. Adam doeg al ibud damav, ve'eno doeg al ibud yamav. Damav enam ozrim, yamav enam chozrim. Joanne, in the English.
This is text 3.
Yes.
Folks fret over a lost dime and fail to fret over lost time. But money provides no reprieve, while time is impossible to retrieve. Can I make a comment on what you were asking before?
The conversation with Laura, go ahead.
Yes. So of course, I would always say my time is more value than money. But when I was younger, if you had said to me, which would you feel a greater loss, getting $1,000 ticket or losing a day, I would have said, oh, the $1,000 loss. But as I've gotten older, money has less meaning for me, maybe because I'm secure. And yet my time, which I've always valued, that has more value to me now than it maybe did before, even though I was always so busy and always had so much to do. Now that I have less that I have to do, somehow my time is more valuable.
Absolutely. And if you don't mind, I'm going to use your comment. I think what you're saying is so powerful, so true. But first of all, I want to ask you a question of interest. Joanne, let me ask you a different question. If I were to ask you question 1 in your younger years, the 20-year-old Joanne, I would have turned to you and said, which do you consider greater value, your time or your money? Would you have said money, or would you have said time, but then when it came down to it, it actually would have been money?
Oh, I would have said time, because it seemed I never had enough time.
Right. In other words, we recognize, I think as human beings, we recognize throughout our lives that time is an important value. We should really recognize it. But for some reason, when it comes down to the practicality of it, very often we're not actually practicing it. Now, I'm going to use your insight Joanne, particularly the insight about as you get older, and I think where you were going with this is that you have less time left. You know that, even though none of us knows how long we're going to live, we know that the older we get, the less time we have. You use that that makes every moment count. Okay, so I'm going to use that as a springboard to skip text 4 for a minute. We'll do this a little out of order, but let's jump to page 217, text 5. This is such an insightful text. So this is a blog post. Okay, Miles Alpern Levin lived from 1988 to 2007, the age of 19, or 18 and a half, whatever it was. He was diagnosed with a terrible, terrible disease. And here's the brilliance of it. When he was diagnosed, or a number of days after he was diagnosed, he started a blog. He would post every couple of days. And he was such a brilliant writer that his dad afterwards went and collected them all and published them in a book called Keep Fighting, Stop Struggling, the Miles Levin Story. The entry we're about to read, and Larry, if you can read this for us, please, that would be great, is from about 30 days after he was diagnosed. Larry, when you're ready.
Okay. I went to the driving range the other day and I was thinking how you start out with a big bucket of golf balls and you just start hitting away carelessly. You've dozens of them. Each individual ball means nothing. You just hit. One ball gone is practically inconsequential when subtracted from your bottomless bucket. There are no practice swings or technique reevaluations after a bad shot because so many more tries remained. Yet eventually you to reach down towards the bottom of the bucket to scavenge for another shot, and you realize that tries are running out. Now that just a handful left, each swing becomes more meaningful. The right technique becomes more crucial. So between each shot, you take a couple practice swings and a few deep breaths. There's a very strong need to end on a good note, even if every preceding shot was horrible. Getting it right at the end means a lot. You know, as you tee up your last ball, this is my final shot. I want to crush this with perfection. I must make this count. Limited quantities of limited time brings a new precious value and significance to everything you do. Living every day shooting as if it's your last shot. I know I have to. I found out today 5-year survival rates are just 30%.
Thank you, Larry. Can I just take a moment to say, at 17 years old, a brilliant writer? Am I right?
Yeah.
Anybody else appreciate this? And I was like blown away by his such a powerful illustration, the way he talks about this. So what's going on here? Why is it that when we're younger, and really, I think we can take out of that even when we're older, we still have the same issue, just we're learning from our mistakes. Why is it that we have a hard time valuing a dime? Sorry, valuing, how did they manage to make it rhyme? I don't remember. Valuing time. We have a hard time actually valuing time, and we don't have a hard time valuing a dime. It's interesting because what the Talmud is pointing out to us there, sorry, it's not the Talmud, it's Rabbi Shimon Frankfurter in Sefer HaChaim. What he's pointing out to us there is that Damav Einam Ozrin, your money has no reprieve. It's doing nothing for you. But more importantly, Yamav Einam Chozrin, time is impossible to retrieve. In English, there's a word that I only learned as I was prepping this course called fungible. Money is fungible. The lawyers on the group I see are nodding already. Fungible. The idea that a dollar can be replaced by a dollar. Obviously, you can never replace a dollar if you burn it. There is no other dollar. But the fact of the matter is that this dollar and the other dollar are really worth the same amount. So you give somebody $1, they give you back a different dollar. It really doesn't make that much of a difference to you. There is no inherent value to the dollar itself. Food is the same way, right? One cup of coffee spills, I get myself another cup of coffee. I had no emotional or valuable attachment to that cup of coffee, even though that cup of coffee will never come back. An example of something that we know of in life that's not fungible, such a great example, is children. You can't just go to the daycare and say, give me a child, any child, it's fine. I dropped one off, I'll take one home. No big deal, which one? You can't do that. A child is a child. There's such inherent value to the child itself. Even though every child also has this inherent value, you can't exchange them. That's not the way they work. Unfortunately, and as Joanne mentioned, particularly when we're younger, we often look at time as fungible. We say to ourselves, this minute, it's fine. I got a minute to wait. I got a minute to kill. There's another minute coming right afterwards. There's always another minute coming after this minute until there isn't. And that's the point that we're trying to drive home here with the idea of contemplating mortality benefiting us in that way. In fact, originally when the world was created, people lived longer lives. Until the Mabul, until the Great Flood, people actually lived longer lives. Yehuda, if I can ask you to please read for us text 4, which talks about this idea. Careful not to spell Yingara. Text 4, so we're going back now for those that are following. 2:16, the benefit of the angel of death. Yehuda, don't forget to unmute yourself. There you go.
Okay. If not for our fear of the angel of death, what wrongs we would commit against our Father in heaven. Let us learn from the first 10 generations of humanity. God showered them with abundant paradise, like goodness, including centuries-long lifespan. Yet they were on the brink of destroying the world.
So too much time led them to not appreciate every minute of that time. So God lowered it. But we still struggle with that struggle. We have a certain amount of years, we don't know how long. We have a certain amount of minutes, we don't know how long. And yet every single minute has to be appreciated. And sometimes it feels like time is just so long. The amount of time that we have in this world is so long. Hence the title of the lesson, that we should recognize life is short. And if we drive that home, then we'll recognize them, we'll appreciate them. That will actually begin to affect our lives. Begin to live every day as if it's your last. You know what I mean? As the meditation was pointing out to us. So let's recap here. Where were we? When we avoid our mortality and we think life just goes on forever, we start to focus on selfish things. Time is dispensable. We can procrastinate away a day, a minute, an hour without any issue. Because you're disconnected from what your life is truly about, and you don't have a true mission that you're focused on. Whereas if you are actually focused, then your life begins to take on a tremendous amount of meaning. And this is driven home by Miles Levin's idea. So before we conclude this section, let's try exercise 6.3, which is on page 218. Allowing yourself a moment to contemplate, and if you can write this in the chat, I think we'll all be able to gain from each other's perspectives here. Allowing yourself a moment to contemplate between each response, record 5 meaningful endings to the following statement. Life is too short to, please type it in the chat. Let's see some people's responses. I'll get started. I have a good one.
Hi, Menachem. Hello.
Oh, Larry, you're on the same note as me. To bear grudges, to be angry forever, to waste. Life is too short to waste. Very good. That's on the time point again. To fret. Very good. Hold on to anger. I see a lot of us here are on the same point. We all know that we have moments when we get angry at somebody, or we hold on to something that somebody else has. And if we would actually focus on the idea, if we would actually focus on this concept, then we would recognize that this is silly. Let's get some more. Life is too short to waste. Life is too short to worry about what others think about us. How powerful is that? We should focus on what's important to us and what's important to our mission to the world. Arnold, you got something? Run. Yehuda, come on. Let's hear. Life is too short to
feel like you're a victim.
To feel like you're a victim. Yeah, that's a similar point that Sheila mentioned about worrying about what other people think of us. Yeah, very good. To victimize yourself. Very good.
Most of everything that I could come up with is already covered.
Fear. Very good one. I like that. Life is too short to fear. To hold regrets. Yes. I mean, Steve, I'll put a caveat on that. Like it's good every once in a while to feel regret of something negative that we did, but to let it swallow us up. Yeah. If we're wasting time regretting, if it's leading to positive behavior now, then we're not just regretting, we're actually doing positive things. But if we're actually doing positive things, then I think that's not just regretting, then we're actually very good. I love this. Okay. I think there is another very important lesson, and with this we're going to conclude this section. It's a very powerful story. Menachem. Hold on just 1 minute, please. We're gonna work on this. All right, hopefully we can wrap up in time and we'll be okay here. So there's another powerful story that I want to share just on this topic of all the things that contemplating our day of mortality can lead to. We spoke about not wasting time. We spoke about, before that we had the, sorry, I lost my train of thought there with Menachem. We spoke about the idea of actually focusing and recognizing that these ideas can, the idea of focusing on our day of death can lead to us having proper focus on the true ideas and the things that are most important in life. And I want to add one more thing to that. If you heard this story, please hear it again. It's a good one. It's a really good one. It's a mashal. It's an analogy that's given. But it's like, so far as analogies go, literally, this is probably one of the best that I've ever heard. So they tell the story of a man who was a lo yutzlach, or a shlomazel. Anybody ever hear the term shlomazel? Anything he put his hands to wasn't successful. He tried his hand at being a lawyer. He couldn't make it. He went to school. He dropped out. He just everything. He couldn't figure it out. Even working in a store, nothing seemed to work for him. So one day he's home, and his wife is like, "Yankel, you got to get a job. You got to do something. You got to learn to support the family. I'm bringing the children. I'm taking care of the house. You got to support the family." So she's looking through the newspaper, and she sees an ad. The ad reads as follows: 6 tickets left on voyage to Diamond Island. And she says, "Yankel, you know what? Why don't you try this?" So they pawn some of their last things that they own, and they stick Yankel on a ship, which by some far stretch of the imagination is going to some island where everybody says that if you go to that island, it's like a week-long trip, but if you manage to get there, there's diamonds everywhere. Instead of dirt there, they have diamonds. Sure enough, Yankel goes in the ship. He arrives at the island. They disembark, and he's shocked. On the beach, instead of sand, there's diamonds everywhere. He can't even properly get off the ship. He tumbles off the ship. He starts gathering diamonds. He stuffs his pockets. I'm rich. He's walking around in a daze. Like imagine you won the lottery like this. After a couple minutes, he realizes he's starving. He hasn't eaten anything in a very long time. So he goes nearby. He finds some high-class restaurant right there on the beach. He pops in. He goes, "Bring me your finest this, the finest that." He's ordering appetizers. He's ordering, and they bring everything, and he has a nice hearty meal. He's sitting there at the end of the meal. He's like, thank you to the waiter, thank you to God, thank you to the owner, thank you to the chicken, thank you to the cow who made this meat. He's thanking everybody, so amazing. And the waiter comes over with the bill. It's larger than everything, any bill he's ever seen in his life. He's like, "No worry, I got this." He pulls out 2 diamonds from his pocket. He whips it down on the table like a gvir, like a rich man. He says, "Keep the change." The waiter looks at him and goes, "You fell into the mood." He's like, what are you giving me here? You got to pay for your meal. So he goes, "Here, I'm giving you diamonds." You realize I'm giving you diamonds? He goes, "Oh, you're one of those. You just arrived here, right? You're a newbie. You're fresh off the boat. You're a greener, right? You're green." He goes, "On this island, diamonds are worthless. You can't use diamonds here. I can go outside of the beach and get myself my own diamonds." Yankel thinks for a moment. Makes sense. So he says, "So what's worth something here?" He says, "Listen, we don't have that many chickens on the island, and schmaltz. We're coming to Pesach now, right? A lot of Jewish mothers use schmaltz to cook on Pesach. Yiddish mamas. Says schmaltz, chicken fat. That's worth millions here." So he says, "All right, where can I get some chicken fat?" He says, "You got to work for your chicken fat." He says, "All right." They put him to work as a dishwasher. Turns out that on this island he has a little bit more luck. From a dishwasher, he becomes a busboy. From a busboy, he becomes a chef, a sous chef, then a chef. He's learning the trade. I guess for some reason, back on the mainland, he never tried his hand at restaurateurship. Before you know it, he's a partner in the restaurant. He buys the restaurant out from the owner. He opens up 6 more branches, and he becomes like a magnet, like a restaurant magnet. He's starting to buy properties. And before you know it, he has so much chicken fat. He's from the most wealthy chicken fat magnates on the island. But a year later, one of his friends says to him, Yankel, I don't know if you know, but the anniversary of your arrival here on the island and this year of your tremendous success and growth is coming up. It's time. You should probably go pay your wife a visit, your children. He says, it's a great idea. He has all the chicken fat in the world. He hires a yacht and he packs the whole bottom up with chicken fat. And he fills the whole here as much chicken fat as he can have it out without the boat sinking, and they sail on off back to town. As he starts to get back to his hometown, he notices that everybody on the island, the people know he's coming. They sent people ahead to tell, and like people are like backing away from the shore. You imagine all that chicken fat in one spot? It was a stench to the high heavens. And as they're arriving back to the mainland, people are like, "What is going on?" His wife comes, and like he's like about to give her a massive hug, and she's like, "Yeah, you need like 6 showers before I even touch you. Like, what's wrong with you?" And by the way, where's all the diamonds? He goes, "What do you mean diamonds? Diamonds are nothing. Look what I have here. I have chicken fat up to once." She looks at it. She goes, "Oi, you're still a shlomazel. Nothing has changed." Finally, she says, "I don't understand. So you were there holding. You don't even have one diamond." So he says, "You know what? I think I have the pair of pants that I wore on the first day that I arrived, and in the pockets there's still a couple diamonds that I just never threw out because I never really wore those pants anymore. I became a big wealthy millionaire." Finally, they take out a couple diamonds. With those diamonds, they manage to purchase something. He manages to put his life together. I think that the lesson here is so powerful. The Neshama comes down here into this world. Before it comes down, it's told, listen, don't get distracted by all the chicken fat. There are diamonds here, and that's why you're coming here. This world is full of moments, opportunities to do a mitzvah, to connect with God, to be good to a fellow human being. And the soul enters the world on a mission to collect diamonds. And then we come here and we get distracted with all this schmaltz. Ben Franklin's and Teslas, and beautiful houses. We get distracted by like all these different motorcycles and cigars and wines and all these beautiful restaurants. We get distracted by all this schmaltz. Then we come up to heaven and it like reeks. It stinks. All this schmaltz, all this physicality that the Neshama collected. It's like, what are you doing here? And the Neshama finally finds a few diamonds, a few mitzvahs that it managed to do, whether in the beginning or throughout its life, and that's what it lives with for all of its eternity. I think it's such a powerful analogy to remind us that contemplating the fact that one day we're going to need to come up to heaven, as we did as we recognized in the meditation, such an important thing. And this brings us to our next section. We're on page 220, the golden years. All right, the golden years. If you're a retiree, I apologize in advance. The Rebbe was not a very big fan of retirement. Judaism in general is not a very big fan of retirement. But before I say so, and I blow out of the water a couple of people here that I know that are retired, I will clarify by retirement here we mean the idea that that's it. My life in terms of what I accomplished is done. That this should be the notion for retirement. My life as I accomplished it is done. And now is my time to kick back and just relax. And I'm going to golf and I'm going to fish. This idea, Judaism has no patience for it. Let's start with text 6. Arnold, with no implication here meant. Please read for us text 6. Don't forget to unmute yourself. Go ahead.
Okay, good. You had to choose me, right? Okay.
I said no implications. You read it to whatever you want to do.
Okay, Rabbi Yehuda said, those who are married in their younger decades should nevertheless remarry in their old age. Those who have children while they were young should continue to have children in their older years. So it is said, sow your seeds in the morning and do not withhold your hand in the evening. For you do not know which will prosper, whether this one or that, or whether this will be equally good or not. That's from Ecclesiastes. Rabbi Akiva said, those who studied Torah in their youth should continue to study in their old age. Those who have have had discipline in their younger years should continue to have discipline in their seniority. So it is stated, sow your seeds in the morning, etc.
Thank you, Yosef Ilan. And by the way, Rabbi Akiva is one to talk. You know, that's a man. He's a sure. I'd be happy to open it for you. Here you go. Rabbi Akiva is a man who had 24,000 students die in a plague, and he didn't let that stop him.
That's right.
Without getting into the whole story of Rabbi Akiva's life, but he didn't let that stop him, and he said, "Listen, it's time to build new students," and he ended up garnering another 24,000 students, and teaching them Torah and teaching them the way of Hashem, etc. Because he believed it's never too late. Every minute is worth living. Every minute is a minute to appreciate. Every minute is a minute to connect to God. Every minute is a minute to connect with our mission in life. And ultimately, by the way, our happiness depends on productivity. If you're newly retired, this is going to come really as a surprise, as a shocker to you. But it turns out that there's a lot of science that actually retirement leads to depression. Not the beginning. The beginning is a very happy, like honeymoon phase. But later on, it begins to lead to depression. Let's read this article from the Telegraph. Chuck, you want to read for us? You popped into the screen. Now we're going to put you on the spot. That's it. Text 7.
Here.
Page
read it.
221. You want to read for us a little bit? It's a powerful article.
Listen, I can't retire. I've got to live to 100.
I was going to say, I know that you also don't believe in retirement. And even though you're past the age for retirement, you're going strong. So go ahead. Read for us.
Retirement can cause a drastic decline in health, according to a new study. Research by the Institute of Economic Affairs found that both mental and physical health can suffer after retirement. The study, Work Longer, Live Healthier, the relationship between economic activity, health, and government policy shows there's a small boost in health immediately after retirement, but that over the longer term, there's a significant deterioration. It suggests that retirement increases the likelihood of suffering from clinical depression by 40%, and the chance of having at least one diagnosed physical condition by about 60%. The probability of taking medication for such a condition rises by about 60% as well. According to the findings, people who are retired are 40% less likely than others to describe themselves as being in very good or excellent health. Interesting.
We're not spending our time. Take a look at figure 6.1. This is some fascinating stuff, and I hope you have the footnotes here that really give us all the research behind it.
6.1.
Stuff about
prevalence of common mental disorders in men and women.
Right. No, I'm not saying to you specifically, Chuck. I'm saying I think everyone should check out this figure. I think it's a very powerful. There's some very powerful information there. But I think the science. Hold on. Where did I go here? I don't know what I did here. I was trying to share. There we go. I think that the science here is clear that there are some very, very strong benefits to not just kicking back and saying, my life is done, now I enjoy myself. This is very similar to the YOLO attitude we described in the young generation now. You only live once, have a bucket list, go skydiving, do a couple things like that. So retirement is increasing the likelihood of all these terrible things. So what should I do during my retirement years? A lot of you looking at me and saying, dude, I'm not going to continue working as what I mean. Some of us have the luxury of continuing to do that. Maybe the job you had is not as physically taxing, etc. But some people, they need to stop working. So then what is that time meant for? What are these golden years meant for? So it turns out that there's always something that we are uniquely positioned to do. Even as we get older, Hashem gives us specific strengths and talents that we have that we have as a gift to society. Chuck, I see you want to, or Barbie, one of you wants to say something. Let me just finish this point, and then you'll say your comments, and then I think there's also a couple of other people had questions. And the Torah actually has advice specifically for the elderly. Obviously, over the years, we gain experience, and we have things that we can share with the world. So we can mentor the younger people and show them the way. Whether that's our grandchildren, whether that's our children, or whether that's just strangers, right? Many people do this. We can volunteer, as I know many of you on this group that are technically retirees can do. And many of you, in fact, all of you on this group are utilizing, if you're retired, you're already utilizing this time to study more Torah, which is a very, very powerful point. But I want to call attention to this experience idea, which is text 8. Esther Necha, can you read for us, please? Text 8.
Okay, I gotta go.
If the elders advise you to destruct and the youth to construct, heed the counsel of the elders, because destruction upon the advice of elders is constructive, and construction upon the advice of youth is destructive.
This is, again, one of those quotes that's so much more powerful in the Hebrew to the Talmud and Megillah. Stiras zekenim binyan, destruction of the elders is construction. If an elder is telling you to destruct because they have so much life experience, they can be telling you to destroy something, and that's truly building it. That's the right attitude, and that is actually building that thing, building that scenario, building that situation, whatever it is. Whereas if the young are telling you to build, to construct, that can actually be destructive. Why? Because the experience that comes with time and comes with life experience and comes with age is tremendously beneficial. I try to live my life this way. You know, it's hard to always be accepting advice from other people, but people who have life experience, they save you the hassle of, and I know I speak as probably one of the youngest here. I don't think I'm the youngest here on the Zoom, but definitely one of the youngest. But it's important for us to listen to our elders, and I think to elders the lesson is a time, the golden years are not meant to just say, all right, I make fun of the young all the time, and I see them making all the same mistakes that I made, but I spend my time golfing, or I spend my time just kicking back and relaxing because I earned it. No, it's a time to actually guide younger ones, etc. I'm actually looking around at the cameras here, and I want to say to your credit, I know many of you that have little projects that you... Was your Torah? It's in Bina's basket there on the steps. You see that? You want to dance with the Torah? All right, he's going to dance with the Torah. He's already doing what we're supposed to be doing to retirement, the extra study of the Torah. He's doing it now. All right, he's way ahead of us. Always has been. All right. So that is the end of this particular point. Before we go into the genesis of mortality, which is kind of the final point we want to make here, which I really want to talk about, I'm very excited because I really think it's the perfect way to end this course, end this lesson, but also this course. Let me take some questions. Any questions here? Barbie, was it you or Chuck that wanted to say something? You have to unmute. Sorry.
No, go on to somebody else.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. There's some very good students here. Everybody agrees with everything I'm saying. Begging for somebody to disagree with me, and everybody agrees. Okay, well, then I can hold you all accountable for doing it.
I'm just taking it in, that's all.
He's just taking it in. Steve, but you don't retire for another 35 years anyways, right? You're younger than me.
He's only
I retired
3.
10 years ago, and it was the worst thing I ever did in my life.
You're in agreement here. You're in agreement here. Yes, Larry, sorry, a question?
No, I was saying Steve is always joking about that. He's only 3. He's joking that with Menachem.
All right. Okay. I want to end today's lesson by talking a little bit about Techiyat HaMetim, the resurrection of the dead. And I know it's a hot topic. I know it's like a topic that a lot of people, I'm not entirely sure what they believe about it. And we'll get to that shortly, okay? But let's start off with a question like this. And at the risk of literally undoing all the work that we've done till now, because we spent the past 6 weeks talking about how death is inevitable and every person should recognize that one day they're going to die and how that should affect them, and the soul one day is going to leave the body and all these different things. There's going to be a heaven and a hell. There's going to be all these things. But let me challenge that for a moment. Is death inevitable? It turns out that not necessarily is it. Steve, can you read for us text 9a on page 224? We're going to go all the way back to the beginning, when the first man was created.
Okay, hang on.
We're on page 224.
Yeah, I'm trying to get there. I just have
Okay.
to turn the page.
Sorry about
I have to learn how to turn the page first, George. Okay, you want me to read a fatal glitch, right?
No, the consequence foretold.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
God commanded man, saying, of every tree of the garden you may freely eat, But do not eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, for on that day that you eat from it, you will certainly die.
All right, we're all familiar with the story. What happens? He goes ahead and he eats from this tree. Steve, does he die?
Yes. Adam?
Really?
Adam?
Really? He goes on to live another 930 nice, healthy, luscious years.
Yeah, but he dies. It doesn't matter. The end. There's the end.
You're already telling us the answer. But I'm asking you a question. God says that on the day that you will eat from it, you will die. So all the commentary point out, not that he's going to die that day.
He's going to die.
Forever. Exactly.
Right.
He was supposed to live forever. He was supposed to have everlasting life. And because he ate from that tree of good and evil, ate Sadat Tovara, that's why he died. So what's going on here? Let's see. The consequence fulfilled. Keep going, Steve. Text 9b.
Okay, by the sweat of your brow you shall eat bread until you return to the ground. For you were taken from it. For you are dust, and you will return to dust.
So it turns out that this whole idea of death is really a glitch in the system. Originally, death wasn't part of the plan. But because of this first sin of the tree of knowledge, therefore, death was introduced to the world. Perhaps this background can lend can shed some light on the prophecy that we get about the way it's all going to end. In text 10, Marilyn, can you read for us, please? In text 10, we have Isaiah prophesying about the time when Mashiach comes. One of the things that will happen then.
God will eradicate death forever and wipe the tears off every face.
So at a certain point, there will come a time after Mashiach comes, and if it hasn't happened, we know Mashiach hasn't come yet. There will come a day. There will come a day when Mashiach will come and death will be eradicated from the world forever. And I see somebody asking, I don't get it. I didn't eat from that tree. Nobody else ate from that tree. Why are we dying? The answer, Shlomo, is found in last week's lesson. Remember last week's lesson? Where are you, Shlomo? There he is. Shlomo, what's the answer? I know you asked the question, but I want to know if you know the answer.
I don't remember.
You don't remember? Last week we said that our souls all originated in Adam's soul. Your life is just one particular offshoot from Adam's soul, right? Adam's soul is that included all of the souls.
So it's like Atma Kadma, is that how we say it?
Adam Kadmon, no. Now you're getting Hasidic on me with all these different levels. No, on a very simple level, Adam, it's related. What you're talking about is related. I don't want to get too off topic here. But Adam Arishon's soul included all of our souls. So it was us that ate from the tree of knowledge. But leaving that aside for a second. So creation as we know it today includes death. But there will come a time when death will be eradicated from the world. So let's see where this leaves us. Let's understand the transformation. Before the sin of the tree of knowledge, here's what happened. Everything was in sync. The body and the soul worked together like two peas in a pod. The body was selfless. The only desire that it had was to do the will of Hashem, and it had absolutely no ego. In other words, and by the way, before we get to all of this, a lot of you are probably thinking now about the animal soul or the evil inclination and the desire to do negative. Didn't that exist within Adam? The answer is no. Adam and Eve didn't have evil within them. All of us have good and evil within us. We have an animal soul, a godly soul, for those of you that know all about Tanya, etc. But Adam and Eve, their animal soul was the snake. Evil existed as a separate entity from them. Their body and soul were completely in sync. The soul wants to daven, the body davened. The soul wants to learn Torah, wants to connect to God, the body connected to God. They were all fused in one mission to connect with God. But now, so obviously there was no conflict of interest between the body and the soul. But then came the tree of knowledge, and it introduced two separate entities. The body, together with its evil inclination, together with its animal soul, has an ego, has a self that's separate from the neshama, and is pulling in different directions. It wants chocolate cake. It doesn't want to connect to God necessarily. And the body can choose to do the opposite of what the soul wants, the opposite of God's will in any particular moment. And so therefore, death is not necessarily a punishment for any particular sin that we do, as we mentioned earlier. It's more the consequence. We spoke about this a lot 3 lessons ago. Let's read about this from the Rebbe, in particular, Maimer, which is called Bila Hamavet Lanetzach. Where are we holding here? Who's reading here? Laura, can I ask you to read? Laura Batat? Text 11. Page 226. One of you, either Laura or Faye.
The condition of death that was introduced to the world through the sin of the tree of knowledge was a natural consequence of the very sin itself. To explain, life is associated exclusively with holiness. Unholiness, on the other hand, is death. As a result of the sin of the tree of knowledge, unholiness, spiritual death, mingled with human identity, from which the condition of physical death is natural, eventual consequence.
So let's just understand what's going on here. Thank you, Faye. So the body and the soul, as they were before the sin of the tree of knowledge, they were only a godly entity. Of course, they're not going to die. God never dies. God is everlasting. God is omniscient and omnipotent. So the soul was as well. The soul and the body, together with the human being, was going to live forever. And it wasn't that God got upset at Adam for eating from the tree of knowledge, and therefore he says, now it's time to give you death. I have to end your existence at a certain point. No. Hashem said, listen, you imbibed, you took within yourself unholiness. You added it to your existence. You ate from the tree, what's the full name? The tree of knowledge between good and evil, where good and evil are mixed. That's the type of existence you want. You took that within yourself and you changed your existence to be one that now has unholiness in it. Or another name for unholiness is death. The good news is that when Mashiach comes, we will have fully eradicated unholiness from the world, with all of our mitzvahs, with all of our missions being completed, etc., as we spoke a little bit about that last week. And therefore, we will have arrived at a state where life is eternal. Again, not as a reward, but as a direct consequence of our actions. And this really brings us to a very powerful point. Hold on. We did most of this. I apologize that I didn't have the slides up at the right time. Okay. This brings us to resurrection of the dead. We've spoken earlier in this class about the idea that there are 13 principles of faith. And we even analyzed what exactly a principle is. A principle is not a mitzvah. It's not us saying this is something that I should do to connect to God, etc. No. A principle is way before a mitzvah, intellectually. A principle means that the entire faith is built around this concept. Some of the ideas that we discussed were believing in God is one of the 13 principles of faith, as Maimonides says it. Another one is believing in Mashiach, because our life's mission is to get to Mashiach. We discussed a lot in lesson 3, reward and punishment, and why that's so important, and why it's a principle of our faith, and it's not just something that we believe in as a byproduct. At the time we discussed was that is the true identity of a mitzvah and a transgression of God. Connecting or disconnecting from God is the true identity of a mitzvah, and that's what reward and punishment is. All right. One of the 13 principles of faith is to believe in the resurrection of the dead. Text 12. Here it is. Loud and clear in front of us. Ron, you want to read for us, please? Ron Rohr. Yeah, go ahead. Text 12.
The resurrection of the dead is the foundation of the Torah of Moses. One cannot maintain a connection to the Jewish religion and the Jewish nation without this belief.
1 second. Resurrection of the dead is one of the fundamentals of Jewish belief? I get that Mashiach should be one of them, but resurrection of the dead? I don't understand. The elimination of war and world peace, which is also a detail in Mashiach, that's not one of the principles of faith. Why not? Why out of all the details of the time of Mashiach is this one chosen? To believe in food growing on trees, not needing to work for money. All these beautiful things that are going to happen when Mashiach comes, None of these things are fundamentals of our belief. We have to believe Mashiach coming. Not necessarily all the details do we have to spend time understanding and making it a principle upon which our belief system is built. Why is believing in the resurrection of the dead, which seems to be just a detail, why is that such a big deal? So the answer lies in this exact explanation that we gave until now. True resurrection of the dead is not just the abolishment of death. It's not just a nice fringe benefit. Where is it? Here we go. Resurrection of the dead is the actualization of the resyncing of body and soul, which was the ultimate purpose of creation. Ever since day number 1, when Adam sinned with the tree of knowledge, ever since day number 1, when Adam sinned with the tree, what?
My watermelon is stuck in the couch.
Your watermelon stuck in the couch?
Yes.
Okay.
My
We'll get it out soon.
watermelon.
Okay, we'll get it out soon. Don't worry.
Yeah, but I like to.
Sorry about this.
I don't want to spill all over.
You don't want it to spill all over?
No.
Okay, I'm gonna come get it in 1 minute, okay?
Yeah, but I will take it out.
Carefully?
Yeah.
Okay.
Carefully.
Sounds good.
If I want to drink some.
Oh, now or soon?
Soon.
Soon, okay. So now you have to sit here quietly if you want to sit with me, okay? All right. So now, if we understand the resurrection of the dead, not just as just a nice fringe benefit, it's nice that everybody will be alive. But resurrection of the dead is the actualization of the resyncing of body and soul, the whole reason that we're here, the mission that we did here in this world, to literally come back to our soul and our body being divine and not having the evil. So then, of course, that's a fundamental Jewish belief. The ultimate answer to death is not its explanation or justification, as we have spent 5 weeks doing now, but its abolishment, which comes with the time of Mashiach. Okay, Menachem, hold on just 1 second.
Sushi? Oh.
Yes, Steve, hold on 1 second.
Tati.
Menachem, I need to teach now, so you can take this. Give me 5 more minutes. I'm almost done, okay?
Tati.
Yes. Okay. And this is why Techiyat HaMeitim is such a very, very important point. And I will conclude, at least for right now, by going back to a letter of the Rebbe, which we've quoted a few times. And I want to end off with this point, and then we'll kind of wrap up what we did today, which is text 13. Steve, I know you want to share something. So right after this, if you can please read for us.
Lessons.
Text 13. Again, the same letter which the Rebbe wrote to Ariel Sharon on the passing, I think it was his son, right, who passed away. Maybe he was lost in war, I think. I remember the details. And we shared a few powerful points in this letter. And here's one more point where the Rebbe talks about the language that we use to comfort mourners. Go ahead, Steve. Text 13.
A kernel of consolation is captured in the traditional hallowed statement of consolation that has been used to comfort mourners by tens of generations of our nation's communities that follow the Torah tradition. May the omnipresent console you among the other mourners of Zion and Jerusalem. At first glance, the association of these two concepts, Jerusalem's destruction and a personal loss, is perplexing. The reality, however, is that we have perfect confidence in God will rebuild the ruins of Zion and Jerusalem. He will gather the dispersed remnants of Israel from the ends of the earth through our righteous Mashiach, and he will bring them gladness to witness the joy of Zion and Jerusalem. We are equally confident that the same is true with regard to our personal bereavement. God will fulfill his promise that those who dwell in the dust shall awake and joyfully sing. Great indeed will be the happiness and rejoicing then, when all will meet together in the resurrection of the dead.
Thank you, Steve. You know, it's a little bit, if you think about it, it's a little bit distracting. We come to somebody, they're grieving for a loved one, and we tell them, may God comfort you together with the mourners of Zion and Jerusalem. What do you mention Zion and Jerusalem? Okay, so we had the meditation earlier about how powerful that is, that the soul is compared to Jerusalem, compared to the Beit HaMikdash, etc. But here the Rebbe adds another point. We're telling them your true consolation is nothing I can say, nothing that you will achieve in this world. Your true consolation will be when Mashiach comes. You know, often we have a yard site in shul. I'll share this with all of you now, because I know that many of you have lost loved ones recently, and that's what drove you to come to this course, or you lost loved ones many years ago, whatever it is. Often we have a yard site in shul, and afterwards everybody says l'chaim. The customary, the traditional blessing, the wish that we tell each other is, may the neshama have an aliyah. May the neshama have an ascent. And that's a reference to what we discussed in lesson 2. The fact that neshama's souls, when they're up there in heaven, they're going through these different levels of connection with godliness, etc. And I love to tell people, I say, may it have the ultimate ascent, which is a descent. When the neshama will come back down, and Menachem, I'm finishing up and then I'm coming, okay? When the neshama will come back down here. When the neshama will come back down here into a soul and literally be as it was before. Because nothing can ever compare to that. Because that will be the abolishment of evil, the abolishment of death forever. And I want you to consider exercise 6.4, as we do at the end of each lesson, to record a point for today's lesson that resonated with you most, and how can recognize the life is limited affect you to better optimize your time, or to affect your life in some way that you should live a better life. Please consider this while we watch the key points from today's lesson.
Lesson 6. Life is short-ish. 1. Our exploration of death and the afterlife through the Torah's lens reduces our fear and unease, allowing us to consider our mortality without panic. 2. Some believe that because we eventually die, nothing is overly important. But Judaism insists that because we die, each moment of life is of supreme importance and should be devoted to matters of eternal relevance. Considering our mortality motivates us to focus on what really matters. 3. Our natural illusion of immortality spurs us to consider time as dispensable. We care more about wasted money than wasted time. Reflecting on life's finitude replaces this illusion with an urgency to take advantage of each moment. 4. We are designed to be productive beings. Retirement is not a Jewish concept. As our brute powers wane, we should transition to mentoring, sharing our wisdom and experience, etc. 5. Before the sin of the tree of knowledge, the body was the soul's extension, and their desires were synced. Sin destroyed that dynamic, causing spiritual death, the misalignment of body and soul. Physical death is an outgrowth of spiritual death. 6. We rectify spiritual death by realigning everything with its purpose, ignoring the superficial layers of a thing, its body, and instead focusing on its inner truth and purpose, soul. Upon completing this rectification, physical death will no longer be part of the human condition.
Thank you for joining us for lesson 6, which this concludes the final lesson of Journey of the Soul. But I do have one more treat for you. The next course, which is titled This Can Happen, is actually on this topic. We spoke about Mashiach a little bit now. And I know because so many people come to me with questions, that the word Mashiach makes a lot of people very uncomfortable. Maybe not in Hebrew, but in English. You say the word Messiah to a Jew, and they're like, Christianity, I don't know, whatever. You look Jewish, but you must be a missionary, etc. The word Messiah has a very non-Jewish feel to it. And my hope is that if you attend this 6-week course, I want to show it to you. I'm going to show you the promo for it. I think you'll walk away with some very, very powerful insight on the Jewish view of Mashiach. And over 6 lessons, we will slowly make you more comfortable with the Jewish view on Mashiach, directly from the sources, from the Rambam, from Maimonides, from the Talmud, from Chassidus, as you know, as we always do in our courses. And I really hope that every single one of you will join us. It's a phenomenal course. It will take you from saying this can never happen to this can happen today. And this is what's going to happen. And I believe in it right now. And if that sounds difficult to you, I challenge you to spend the $89 or $189 for a couple, join us for this course. I think you'll really, really appreciate it. So please turn your attention to the video screens for this promo. The dates for this course begin April 29th, 6 weeks. It's actually Thursdays this time, April 29th, 6 Thursdays. And actually it's already live on our website. If you'd like to go to tonight or tomorrow morning, you can actually register at PasadenaJewishAcademy.com/JLI. One second.